Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Samuel Zinner. Welcome to my desk in the mountain village of Aulla in Tuscany, Italy. Today I want to read for you a paper that I delivered for the Oregon Jewish Cultural Project, 14 March 2021, for the conference Bob Dylan, Jewish Perspectives on His Repertoire. Elliot Wolfson has deftly traced and illuminated the threads of the traditional Jewish trait of melancholia we encounter throughout Bob Dylan's lyrics. In this contribution, I would mention three further threads that feature in Dylan's lyrics, that are all imbricated within and even flow from the dominant chord and chords, so a musical chord and chords or threads of Dylan's lyrics of melancholia. The first thread is rage over the mass death of the Shoah, the Holocaust. The second thread is the fear or dread of apocalyptically impending mass or even universal death. The third thread is that of faith, which is both rooted in and a response to melancholia, rage, and dread, all of which in turn unfold against the backdrop of death in the two modes of mortality and mass murder. So first, rage and revenge. The Shoah. The first thread is rage over the Shoah, which often manifests itself in the desire for revenge. Already in his early period, Dylan sings with biting sarcasm of the Shoah in his 1964 song With God on Our Side. Though they murdered 6 million in the ovens they fried, the Germans now too have God on their side. So fast forward to 1981. We hear the following in stanza 4 of Shot of Love. Why would I want to take your life? You've only murdered my father, raped his wife, tattooed my babies with a poison pen, mocked my God, humiliated my friends, unquote. All right, moving even closer to our own times, following stanza from the 2006 song Ain't Talkin' rings equally with rage and revenge. Now, I'm all worn down by weeping. My eyes are filled with tears, my lips are dry. If I catch my opponents ever sleeping, I'll just slaughter them there where they lie, unquote. Although these two stanzas may not refer directly to the Shoah, neither do they sound like normal expressions of anger. Instead, they are congruent with the type of rage gendered by trauma. All right, well, let's move on to fear and dread, apocalyptic destruction. The second thread is the fear or dread of apocalyptic destruction looming on the horizon of history. In Dylan's youth, after the shadow of the Shoah, the second greatest issue relating to mass death was the reality of the atomic bomb. Under the weight of the unfolding October 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, Dylan composed his surrealist A Hard Rain's A Gonna Fall, with eerie visionary lines such as, I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. A few years later, in 1965, Dylan was to sing in his It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, the following memorable line, quote, this sky too is folding under you, and it's all over now, baby blue, unquote. Each of these lines echoes traditional Tanakh-based phraseology. The mouth of a graveyard brings to mind the frequent biblical expression, the mouth of Sheol. And we also think of the heavens folding in the eschaton. Book of Isaiah, for example. Therefore the netherworld, Sheol, hath enlarged her desire, and opened her mouth without measure, and down goeth their glory and their tumult, and their uproar, and he that rejoiceth among them. The image of the sky folding is attested further in Psalm 102. Citing it in the King James Version, the authorized version, in the letter to the Hebrews, right, chapter 1, verses 10 through 12 in the New Testament, in the Christian scriptures, quote, the heavens shall perish, and as a vesture, as a garment, shalt thou fold them up. Right, with both categories, if you examine that closely with the lyrics of Dylan, you'll see that Dylan is being influenced not necessarily or only by Psalm 102 alone, but via the citation in the letter to the Hebrews. All right, so with both categories of the Shoah and atomic bomb examples, Dylan mixes in love and romance. This calls to mind Freud's dyad of eros and thanatos, love and death. That most famous of all Jewish psychiatrists, right, Sigmund Freud. Freud's Love and Death, right, perhaps will bring to mind, right, the title of Dylan's Love and Theft album, released on September 11, 2001. We will see that Dylan also injects love and romance into the songs of the third thread or third chord, faith. Faith is the nameless oblique, right, which both emerges from and responds to melancholia. We can understand Dylan's approach to faith from a statement he gave in a 2007 interview with Jan Venner, published in the Rolling Stone magazine with the subtitle From Religion to the Atomic Age. Religion is something that is mostly outward appearance. Faith is a different thing. Faith doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a category. It's oblique, so it's unspeakable. We degrade faith by talking about religion. This is as articulate and profound as the statements of any Kabbalist who has written on this point. This posture agrees with what we could call Dylan's ontology of vagueness, which we could derive, right, from the line, quote, "the world mysterious and vague," from Ain't Talkin. Quote, "Ain't talkin', just walking through the world mysterious and vague. Heart burning, still yearning, walking through the cities of the plague," unquote, a fitting lament for our current era pandemic. Right, we also recall from Dylan's 1997 Highlands, "Feel like a prisoner in a world of mystery." Dylan's lyrics are immersed, right, in similar expressions of faith as the nameless oblique. For example, the just cited 2006 song title Ain't Talkin' already says it all. In this same song, Dylan explains in seemingly dialectical terms, "I practice a faith that's been long abandoned. There are no altars on this long and lonesome road." Notice, faith is practiced, not spoken. Similarly, in Dreaming of You, 2008, faith is pondered, not talked about. Quote, "By the grave of some child who neither wept or smiled, I pondered my faith in the rain," unquote. The final stanza of Dylan's 1997 ballad, Not Dark Yet, gives expression to the inexpressible by means of the paradoxes of unmoving movement and unheard hearing. Quote, "I was born here and I'll die here against my will. I know it looks like I'm moving, but I'm standing still. Every nerve in my body is so vacant and numb. I can't remember what it was I came here to get away from. Don't even hear the murmur of a prayer. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there." The first line is a reworking of Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 22. "Against your will you are born, and against you will die. And against your will you die." An even closer parallel is actually found, I discovered later, in the Jewish apocalypse of 4th Ezra. In any case, in Dylan's rendition, one almost hears in between the lines, so to speak, or rather not to speak, that the singer not only cannot choose when he will die, but that when he dies, he will not go out kicking and screaming. He will go out kicking and screaming against Shakespeare's grim death, right? The Taming of the Shrew, Act 1. We hear Dylan Thomas here, quote, "Do not go gentle into that good night, and rage, rage against the dying of the light." The obliqueness of faith has a supreme example in the Exodus story of Moses' encounter with God, in which we learn that to see God's face would be to die. And Dylan refers to this Exodus passage as follows in his I and I from 1983. I, in creation where one's nature neither honors nor forgives. I. One says to the other, no man sees my face and lives. The two I's are those of God and Moses. The two I's are at the same time a punning reference to Moses' two eyes, with which he cannot see God. Iden Day correlates the pun between I, the pronoun, and I, the anatomical feature, in the phrase, "All I see are dark eyes," at the end of each stanza in Dylan's Dark Eyes, 1985. Day correlates this pun with the Highway 61 album notes ending paragraph, in which we encounter the same pun between the pronoun I and the anatomical feature I. Quote, "I cannot say the word I anymore. When I speak this word I, it is as if I am speaking of somebody's eye that I faintly remember. There is no I. There is only a series of mouths." Unquote. The statement, "there is no I," is anticipated earlier in the same album notes in the observation, quote, "Autumn with two zeros above her nose." Unquote. Her eyes are zeros, two nothings. We can first correlate the Highway 61 album note statement, "there is no I, there is only a series of mouths," with the I and I, the pronoun I and I line. One says to the other, "No man sees my face and lives." One says refers to an activity of the mouth, while "no man sees" refers to the activity of the eyes. Next, given the implied equivalence between the pronoun I and the anatomical I, if there is no anatomical I, then there is no pronoun I. This is to say that there is no fixed ego or identity, for the I continually reinvents itself like a variegated series of dreams. This applies to the I, the pronoun, right, both of God and Moshe Rabbeinu. God's name, according to Exodus 3:14, is, "I will be what or who I will be," implying on one level a propensity for unpredictable shifting or metamorphosis. On another level, this divine name creates the suspicion that God is a future-oriented I, pronoun, has not and cannot have arrived to the present, so that God is ever not yet. Right? And Elliot Wolfson has written some profound reflections on that idea, more elegantly articulated than I just have. This would be congruent with the Kabbalistic notion of Ein Sof, literally the infinite, but understood esoterically as the infinite nothing. Notice that in the refrain, one says to the other, "No man sees my face and lives." God has vanished, and Moshe has become an anonymous other. Earlier in Exodus 3:11, Moses had asked, "Who am I?" This implicitly suggests that Moses' I pronoun is, like God's, a nothing as well. As early as 1965, Dylan's Gates of Eden intimates that truth does not dwell in the world, only in Eden. Quote, "And there are no truths outside the gates of Eden," unquote. Eden is the Jewish symbol of the oblique, the inexpressible. The consequence of this is that any direct expression, which by Dylan's defined default pertains to the category of religion and religious teaching, which would include Kabbalah, is an untruth. Eden, as symbol of the oblique and the unspeakable, represents the unattainable and ungraspable, which we must never cease trying to attain and to grasp. As Dylan expresses in his False Prophet, quote, "I'm the enemy of the unlived meaningless life," unquote, to which he adds the cautionary warning that the meaningfully lived life is a lonely life. Quote, "I go where only the lonely can go," unquote. The struggle to attain the unattainable, Eden, both constitutes and sustains the spirit of life. Admittedly, the one who struggles and the one who surrenders will both ultimately vanish in death. However, the one who struggles, like Dylan, for example, may just happen to leave behind a legacy of the unsayable that says it all. A few concluding stray thoughts. Right? Pirkei Avot counsels works over wisdom, good deeds over religious knowledge or discussion. And I think Dylan's lyrics and performances are his good deeds. Probably not his only good deeds, but certainly publicly, these are his good deeds. Dylan's melancholia pervades his work so that we could construct a theology of melancholia on its basis. By contrast, while Dylan does have some entertaining and even funny songs, like The Mighty Quinn, but even it says that everyone's in despair, right? Please, Mrs. Henry, Apple Suckling. Nevertheless, you can't construct a theology of hope or joy on the basis of those songs. 1965's Mr. Tambourine Man, sung by Dylan. Far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrow, yes, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free. Right? But this song, Mr. Tambourine Man, is also replete with crazy sorrow. Quote, and if you hear vague traces of skipping reels of rhyme, I wouldn't pay it any mind. It's just a shadow you're seeing that I'm chasing. So it gets much worse and ends with, quote, let me forget about today until tomorrow. Joy and hope are fleeting. Melancholia abides. There is a constant cosmic background of sorrow out of which the inconstant ebb and flow of hope and joy emerges, struggling as it were, not to drown. Not dark yet. Famous line, behind every beautiful thing, there's been some kind of pain. The converse is not true. That would be, behind every pain, there's been some kind of beautiful thing. Another important line in Ain't Talkin', quote, the suffering is unending, every nook and cranny has its tears, unquote. Carrying a dead man's shield and walking with a toothache in my heel is from Dylan, but it brings to mind Elliot Wolfson's line from his poem Sanguinity, blessed are the lame, and in his serpent dance, to heaven limp the Jew revolting. I think Dylan's preoccupation is not social justice. That was the first box against which Dylan revolted. For instance, in his Gates of Eden, 1965, and there are no truths outside the Gates of Eden. And in the Highway 61 album notes, lifelessness is the great enemy. Lifelessness said when introducing everybody, go save the world, and involvement, that's the issue, and things like that, unquote. Right? And recall the term lifelessness in stanza 4 of Dylan's Desolation Row song. Back to Ain't Talkin'. This is a drama of prayer and good deeds to others. Right? So they say prayer has the power to heal. Right? So pray for me, Mother, which is one way that it's been heard, right, by listeners. So pray for me, and the human heart and evil spirit can dwell. I'm trying to love my neighbor and do good unto others, but oh, Mother, things ain't going well. Another thought that comes to mind in this context of Dylan. The distance of the Messiah is his most intimate nearness to us. It is in the Messiah's distance from us that the Messiah is near to us. Brings to mind Dylan's flirtation. It's more than a flirtation with Christianity. But in any case, Ain't Talkin' then becomes a parody on the gospel song, I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses. And he walks with me and he talks with me. All right, so Ain't Talkin' opens with, as I walked out tonight in the mystic garden, the wounded flowers were dangling from the vine. I was passing by yon cool crystal fountain. Ain't talkin', just walking. The penultimate strophe, we hear, as I walked out in the mystic garden on a hot summer day, a hot summer lawn. Excuse me, ma'am. I beg your pardon. There's no one here. The gardener is gone. So this is a reworking of the Gospel of John, where Mary Magdalene meets Jesus in the garden and doesn't recognize him and addresses him as Sir. So this has been reversed in the gender, right, to ma'am. So the gardener is gone. But God is most near when we cry, Lama, Lama, sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Thank you.